Joining me now for our regular panel is broadcaster Craig Foster and New South Wales One Nation leader Tania Mihailuk. Hi to you both. Good to see you.
I'm opening the show tonight. You're on the front of the show tonight.
You're on the front. You're everywhere. Well, look, let's get straight into it, Craig, because, okay, so today we found out from FIFA that they're going to seek legal advice before holding a council meeting by July 25 to decide whether to suspend Israel from international soccer, of course, because of the Hamas conflict. Now, you have pushed for FIFA to expel Israel. You've supported it. Why are you supporting a ban against Israel when there are many other countries guilty of terrible human rights abuses? I'll give you some examples. Iran, where people are still stoned to death. China, which is accused of genocide against the Uyghur people. Afghanistan, you could be put to death for being homosexual. North Korea, which is also accused of horrific human rights abuses. So why aren't you asking for them to also be banned?
That is a really fantastic question, and it's a question that I have to answer every day as a sport and human rights advocate as to what is the threshold for sport to have to act in these elements. And they're really great examples that you use because I've advocated against all of them. So, for example, in the 2020, I think it was 2022 Winter Olympics, I was calling for athletes to boycott the Beijing Winter Olympics because of what has been called genocide against the Uyghurs. The difference with that is that there has not been an ICJ ruling to say that it is genocide or plausible genocide. So I think in that case, and I know it well, because I have supported the Uyghurs, what happens is, I think the USA call it genocide, others call it crimes against humanity, but there hasn't been a ruling on it. When it comes to Afghanistan, obviously I got a lot of women out of Afghanistan, and I supported last year Cricket Australia's stance in saying that they have gender apartheid, basically, and they don't let women play sport. So I think that they should be banned for sport on that basis. But when it comes to human rights, every single country, including us, has human rights abuses. So what sport has to ask is, what is the threshold, below which a country has to be banned? And so in my view, at the very least, and there's no objective, sport is all over the place because it's very political, right? It just makes own decisions. It's as political as anything. So the question for all of us is, what is the basic premise at which you say, okay, now sport must ban that? And in my view, it is the two most egregious crimes against humanity, which is genocide and is apartheid.
But there's been evidence. There's been US reports, for example, about what's going on in Syria. There's been enough evidence to suggest that China is committing genocide against Uyghurs. So if you do agree, then why are you not calling out for them to be banned as well? China, Syria.
Actually, I have.
So you want them banned from the competition?
So what I'm saying is, well, in my personal view, but it hasn't been ruled on. So the answer, as I just said before, is very simple, is that the difference in all the cases that we're saying, all of them that I've advocated against those countries, because I see it's a duty and responsibility of all of us.
It does sound like double standards, doesn't it?
How can it be double standards? Because the point is that the International Court of Justice has actually ruled that in Israel there is plausible genocide. That's completely different to the others because the ruling is there. And what that ruling does is that says to sport and to me and to you and to the Australian government that we have a duty to prevent genocide. That's the importance of the convention on the prevention and punishment
let me ask you this then. North Korea plays Syria in a World Cup qualifier in less than 3 weeks' time. Now, if you look at North Korea, it's estimated its dictatorship have murdered more than 1.5 million of its own people, possibly up to 3.5 million. Syria is accused of using chemical weapons against its own people. A US government report states that Syrian army bombing has forced 5.7 million people to flee that country, but it also reports unlawful killings, torture, political arrest, sexual violence against its own citizens. Now, these are two countries internationally condemned here, Craig. Have you said anything about this game? Will you condemn this match?
Actually, if you go back through myself, I condemn all of these.
Are you going to condemn this one?
I'm a human rights advocate.
But you're going to ask for this game, for North Korea,
I've just
Syria,
explained
China.
the difference to you. So the problem is that, and FIFA have the strongest human rights policy in all of international sport. That's why they have to make a decision on Israel, because they're bound under their policy. So people say to me, well, why is the IOC, allowing Israel to play? It's because they don't have as strong a policy, and the IOC is hardly the arbiter of moral integrity. the point with FIFA is they have to actually act on this. And the difference is quite simple. So all of those things, I talk about them regularly. That's exactly what I do.
Right,
but the problem is that here the ICJ have made a ruling. And what that means for FIFA is they have to act. We all have a duty to act.
I just find it interesting, Craig, because you call yourself a human rights activist. Yeah, but so where do you draw the line then? So
well, that's the question.
So every other country is fine except for Israel, though. Is that what you're saying?
Okay,
You are a human rights activist. That's what you call yourself.
Exactly.
But aren't you presenting double standards here?
Well, no, I'm not, because what I'm saying is the ICJ has not ruled on those. So, for instance, there's only been, as I understand it, in recent times, 4 rulings on genocide. So it's fundamentally different. Now, so I want Afghanistan kicked out. I have said that China shouldn't be able to host the Olympics because of the genocide against the Uyghurs. But the problem is the international community has not had a ruling on the Uyghurs. I would love them to have it. I want them to have it. But there is a ruling on Israel, and that is very different.
Craig, can I say this, Craig? And I don't have the experience that you have when it comes to soccer, but I'll say this. You're in a position, you're a multicultural, you're a member of the Multicultural Council, right? You're trying to work with people from all different backgrounds, so to speak. What value is it for you to, to intervene in this way? I don't get why you, as someone who's supposed to be, unifying person in this game, you're supposed to be somebody who's actually stepping in and actually, uniting people and uniting different groups. I mean, sport's supposed to bring people together. That was the whole point of sport. And can I say this? The World Cup now has become bigger than the Olympics. And it's not. It shouldn't be the place that politics is played out. There's so much more.
This is human rights. We're talking about human rights. We're not talking about politics.
This is sport.
Sport is deeply
the World
political.
Cup. Well, it shouldn't be. And it shouldn't be for your... and it shouldn't be... I would have thought somebody...
So anyone who thinks sport is not political hasn't been in sport.
Craig, what's your response to that?
I think your question is, so why do I engage myself in this situation? Firstly is because I'm involved in the game and therefore I have a duty. Second is because there is a ruling here by the highest court of the United Nations which says it's plausible genocide.
I mean,
and therefore we all should be...
Craig, you're not a politician. You're not a federal politician. I'm just being honest.
What does it matter? I come from the game.
I'll quote Chris Minns, the Premier.
But I'm a former international for the game. So are you suggesting I shouldn't be talking about my own game? That's ridiculous.
The Premier this week said to his backbench, if you want to be involved in federal politics, go into federal parliament.
Let's talk about the issue, right? So what you guys, what you want to do is attack people for having a view on genocide.
But you're not
Every
just having
Australian
a view.
should
You're
have a view
calling
on
for
genocide.
a country
That's
to
the
be
point.
banned.
You're calling for a country
That is the point. We all have a duty to stop the slaughter of people.
Somebody who's a member of the Multicultural
And I've been
Council.
very clear on October 7. I've been very clear in my view of what's happened since, as has the ICJ. And we all have to step forward and say something. So let's talk about just quickly about the multicultural issue.
No, please.
That's really important. So I support all communities, but what I do is I support international law objectively. I want both sides held accountable for the various war crimes that's occurred.
Well, let me
ask you. Any sides, and in so doing, I stand in solidarity and out of love with every single Australian community.
But what about the Australian Jewish community?
Of course, I do things.
A lot of them watched you. A lot of them watched you play. And they supported you, and they were proud of you when you played. But what would be your message for them now?
Are you alienating? Love to the Australian Jewish community, but I have to. But what I'm saying is, I stand with all.
All right, let me ask you this:
international law is very clear that we can't support atrocities against anyone. I don't support atrocities on October 7, and I don't support atrocities since.
You're calling,
more simple.
So you're calling
by doing
Israel.
So, I stand with all Australian communities equally. That is the point of multiculturalism.
All right, you're calling for Israel to be banned, but what about Palestine?
And by the way,
Hamas,
I'm loving this conversation. This is exactly the conversation we need to have as a country.
Craig, what about Palestine? Hamas-controlled. Should they be banned too for the horrors of October 7?
Okay.
For the slaughter of more than 1,000 Jews, for the rape of women, the torture and the capture of more than 200 hostages.
Okay. Which are all war crimes under humanitarian law.
Right, so should Palestine be banned?
So they need to be... Okay, so let's go back to the start. They are all human rights abuses, right? However, someone needs to take that organisation or those people to the highest court, and if a ruling is given, I will immediately call for them to be banned. Okay. That's the point.
Maybe don't, Craig. Maybe don't.
And so so there's also an international criminal court, which is the other, highest court. There's also an investigation since 2014 into all war crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories, including Hamas.
This is the World Cup.
Hamas leader will be responsible for what happened on October 7, and I want that to happen.
I do want to move on to other topics, but I just want to make this very clear. Despite the fact we've got a situation where Syria is accused of chemical weapons against its own people, Iran stoning people to death, Afghanistan, China against the Uyghur population, North Korea, under Kim Jong-un, you still support all of them participating in FIFA?
No, I didn't say I supported them. I just said I've already called out China over its genocide.
But banning them?
Yeah, I actually called for China to be banned from international sport.
Okay, what about the others? You would call for them to be banned?
Look, as I said, the problem is that every country in the world, including us, commits human rights abuses. That's actually the underlying problem. That's the nexus of your question. What you're saying is, what is the standard here? Because it's so widespread. Yeah. I get that. There's also over 100 conflicts in the world.
It's just unhelpful right now, Craig. I think the point is that
it's very helpful. It's very helpful to many communities. We need to discuss this properly. We need to discuss this honestly.
All right.
And all communities also need to be heard. So do you understand what I'm saying? So what happens is there's over 100 conflicts. So the question for sport is, which ones do you then say? So
all right. We are running out of time. I think we have covered it. But look, this is a big topic for which we need to discuss, Craig. So we appreciate you coming on. But look, let's move on.
Happy to discuss it. I'm delighted to discuss it.
We appreciate you coming on and speaking to us about that. But look, let's move on because, as I mentioned before, One Nation has called for a population plebiscite. Peter Dutton has started the migration debate. One few are willing to have. Tania, One Nation has been quite strong on this. They've called for a plebiscite on population. How far do you think that this call by Peter Dutton goes?
Look, I don't think he's done well for getting attention. It's really hard to get attention when you're the opposition leader in terms of the budget and reply. I don't think 25% is enough. I do think it will attract enough attention, of course, out there, and certainly Albanese is hurting this week because usually when you announce a budget, the attention should be on the government of the day. Dutton has successfully moved it away onto him, which is very good in terms of taking media away from Albo. But ultimately, let's be honest, the public has had a gutful. When you're talking about more than 500,000 people in 1 year coming into Australia, and rightly the issues around housing, infrastructure, people have had enough. And they do want to hear governments and indeed the opposition actually turn around and say that, yes, we need to cut these migration levels.
Yes.
I don't think 25% is enough. I give him credit for what he has said.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
it's not
enough. I think you need to go further. I think he's just shaving around the edges a little bit, okay? And he's touched on some pretty other good issues in the budget in terms of cutting back on green energy and hydrogen, subsidising hydrogen, and indeed the uniform knife laws. But ultimately, we need to pause. We need to press pause when it comes to migration right now because we went crazy numbers between 22 to 23. We know we've had record levels. People are hurting. People are now, it's not going to resolve the housing issue by just cutting back by 25%. Let's be honest.
And
people are still going to suffer when it comes to trying to get a home. We're still going to have difficulty when it comes to rent. The infrastructure's not there. So, look, I give him 10 out of 10 for getting the attention that he wants, but 7 out of 10 for what he's actually responsible.
All right, let's move on because I want to get Craig Foster's thoughts on this.
Not again.
Craig, you're the man of the hour. Look, police will allege that Macarthur FC's captain is one of 3 players part of an alleged A-League betting scandal that has engulfed the sport a week ahead of the grand final. Craig, what's your reaction to this news today?
Obviously really saddened and it's awful to hear. These things happen across a whole range of sports over a period of time, but of course these things are alleged, so we're obviously hopeful in the game. These are professional players, as I used to be, that more material will come to light or something. But I think it certainly raises the broader question about gambling and sport, and the ubiquity within sport. And the more we talk about it, we find that it's quite opaque because we don't have insight into how professional sports, how deep their association with gambling actually is. And it seems as though sports these days have more or less become casinos. So, for example, a major professional sports basically are taking a percentage of the losses of the revenue that these gambling companies are getting by betting on the games, right? And I don't think that's right.
But are you going to call out anyone or ban anyone there, Craig?
Well, Would you like me to? You tell me who you'd like me to. I'm very happy to. But the thing is, so I would like to see gambling not in sport at all.
No.
So that's the end of your question. But the problem is that sport is so reliant on the funding now that it's going to take some time to unravel.
That'll end sport.
Yeah, it's a sad day. Certainly a sad day. Well, look, it's been a big topic. Thank you to both of you.
Great.
Craig Foss and Tania Mihailuk. Good to have you both on as always. Thank you for joining.